Good afternoon. Let's welcome Chef Daniel Patterson, owner of Qua, Plum Bar, Haven, and the forthcoming Alta California restaurant in San Francisco's mid-market neighborhood. He is also the author of the recently released Qua, Stories and Recipes from the Kitchen. Aroma, the magic of essential oils in foods and fragrances. He is also a noted writer on food in the kitchen and beyond, and has written for a number of publications, including Lucky Peach and the New York Times Magazine. Let's give it a round of applause for Chef Patterson. I'm going to let you take the helm, and you're going to do a little presentation discussing your book, which is pretty exciting. Looking forward to hearing you.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for coming down. As you said, I have a little restaurant in San Francisco called Qua. My background is I started working in restaurants when I was 14. I was a dishwasher and then a prep cook, and then I kind of worked my way up. Opened my first restaurant when I was 25, had a couple of restaurants, and then I opened Qua in 2006. One question I get a lot of is Qua, like what does it mean? And so it's an archaic French word. And I asked where did I find it? I found it on the internet, in a search engine, basically. It's an archaic French word that means tranquil or quiet, from the Latin root quietus. Hasn't really been used since the Middle Ages. It transferred to Middle English and became coy, C-O-Y. Quietus, while qua fell out of favor, quietus became anglicized. It's not that nice a word to bring quietus to someone means to kill them. And then it's very close to koi, K-O-I, which is like a Japanese carp. So to this day, people come into our restaurant every once in a while wondering where the sushi is. So I picked a restaurant, a name for the restaurant that no one knew what it meant. It hasn't been used hundreds of years. No one knew how to pronounce it, and it's very like another name. And so they were always very confused, which was actually, it was a monumental failure of branding. But it turns out that it was pretty accurate for what the restaurant was to become, which was something that I didn't realize at the time, but we crossed a lot of categories of things. And I'd like to think we've brought a little clarity to it, but I'm not sure. I guess the restaurant really started in my mind in 2005. So I was in between jobs. When I say in between jobs, I really only had one job in like the last 20 years. I've owned my own restaurants, except one time I tried to take a job and then I got fired. And I couldn't find another one. And so summer 2005, I'm from Massachusetts originally, and I moved out here in 1989, a month before the earthquake. Had nothing to do with it. And after 16 years, like I couldn't figure out exactly my place here. And at that time, I was dating someone who would then become my wife, and I had a lot of time on my hands. So during that time, her mother was very sick. She had cancer, and we went up to visit her a lot. Her mother lives in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas, about 4.5 hours northeast. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's incredibly beautiful. It's like completely untouched by people. There's more animals, I think, than there are people. Her mother was an archaeologist, and she studied Native American culture, and so especially the Maidu tribe. And so if you were going to build a house, say, on a land where nothing had ever been, you would contact her, and she would go and make sure it wasn't like a special place. And so while we were there, we'd take a lot of walks, and she would show me plants and other things that I didn't think were edible. Trees, acorns, like all kinds of things that have been eaten for thousands of years. So California's pretty new. So California's been around 150 years. Before that, it was Mexico. People have been living in California thousands of years. And so somehow, like when I was talking to her, I kind of started to understand this place where I lived. I knew almost nothing about it. All I knew was really the last 50 years. And so I started to study a little bit, and then one day I got a call. I was down in Santa Cruz with a friend. My wife called and said, "You better get up here," and so I did. And I got there, her mother had passed, and it was this incredible moment where like I had no idea like what to say. It was this very powerful reaction when I opened the door, this grief which was so palpable, and I had no idea what to do. And but everyone was hungry, and I knew how to cook, so I started cooking. And she was there, her sister, her mother's best friend and her mother's partner. And for 4 days I cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you know, restaurants are a funny thing. It's like you're feeding people, but there's an element about them, and especially if you're cooking very high-end food, which was always what I did. It's about consistency, and it's about this level of perfectionism that sometimes you lose track a little bit of what it means to cook for someone. And that's what I thought about, you know, what it means to cook for. So that was kind of where I started thinking about what I wanted Qua to be. Like I remember it very distinctly, sitting there in my fiance's mother's house with her crappy stove, going through her pots and pans, trying to find something that wasn't hopelessly dented, and going through her cupboards and going to the one local store that there was, thinking about what it means to cook for someone. So when I started Qua, I wanted something very small, very personal, and something that felt a little bit like you're going into someone's house. And so that's where we opened. It's in a terrible neighborhood. I don't think I could have chosen a worse location in retrospect, but it's in North Beach. And so it's like, it's also next to a strip club. So for 3 years, at least, every single review, like the first line was next. I'm like, you know, there's actually more to the restaurant than that. Fine. But North Beach is one of my favorite places. I would say my favorite place in San Francisco. So down the street, so in the corner of that picture is City Lights bookstore, Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Across the street is Tosca and Vesuvio. I mean, this is where the beat poets used to hang out. This is, down the street from that is Carol Doda, you know, who is like this incredibly famous burlesque performer with these great stories that came out of this place, the Condor, like the couple that was having sex on the piano, the hydraulic piano that broke, and they just kind of went up to the ceiling and kind of trapped them there. I mean, the Hungry Eye, which is Enrico Benducci, Lenny Bruce used to play there in the 50s, and Woody Allen. There was the Jazz Workshop where Thelonious Monk recorded one of his most famous albums. The whole area has been this foment of creativity for so many years. It's become something a little different now, but for me, it still has a little bit of that spirit to it. And so we're on the edge of North Beach, Telegraph Hill, and Jackson Square. So Jackson Square used to be the edge of San Francisco. And so it's a part of the city that's easy to get to. It's kind of central, but also historically in San Francisco, it's got a lot of substance to it. And so and so when we opened, I knew that the restaurant had to fit into the community. And so I thought a lot about that. I'm like, well, how am I going to do this? So one thing I thought is using a lot of the wild ingredients that I've been learning about. Like, I wanted to cook for San Franciscans, people who grew up here, you know? And if you imagine taking a walk and brushing by or just being near like a wild bay tree, like California bay in the summer, and that kind of menthol, eucalyptus aroma, and then bringing that into the dining room, that sense of place very vividly on their plate. That's one thing I thought of. And then I wanted to use the best ingredients that we have here. So I'm only going to use local ingredients that are recognizable. So that means mostly plants. That's our best ingredient. It means there's not a lot of finfish. So I wrote a whole book with no finfish in it, only shellfish. It means a lot of wild plants, but it also means a lot of cultivated stuff and meats raised on grass, and people that I've dealt with for 10, 15 years. Producers like So-Young Scanlon, who is, I think, one of probably the best cheesemaker in the country, who does all of our cheese for us. So bringing in people who had a lot of meaning to the area, to me, and bringing that into the food, and then you know, it's funny, this idea of local. Back then, this idea of like California cuisine was not really didn't really exist. And so then this idea, like, even more that we would work only with local ingredients. At that time, there was pretty much a kind of a schism between haute cuisine, like very high-end food, and then casual food. And we kind of scrambled everything. Restaurants are a lot about symbolism. And so we took the symbols from both things and kind of mixed them together. We have fuzzy pillows and kind of nubbly fabrics on our banquettes, handmade pottery, a lot of things that really were associated with a more rustic style of food. But we served highly personal tasting menu at a time when there was no highly personal kind of modern cooking in the city, and there really wasn't a lot of idea that there was a need for it. And all my friends called me and they're like, "You're crazy. You're going to go out of business." And we almost did for the first 2 years. It was really hard. But what's interesting to me was, so there's a great movie like from 2003. Lars von Trier made a movie called The Five Obstructions. And the premise is kind of a documentary. And there's a very famous older filmmaker, Danish filmmaker called Jørgen Leth. And the premise was he'd kind of gotten a little depressed. He'd kind of lost a little bit of his spirit. And Lars went to him and said, I want to do a movie together. I want you to remake your most famous movie, which was from 1967. It's called The Perfect Human. And I want you to remake it 5 times, but each time with an instruction. So instruction meaning, like the first time, I want you to remake the movie, but left like long, languorous shots. He's like, each cut needs to be only 12 frames, which is like, and what was amazing was he did it. And he did it somehow with his voice, with his honest expression and tact. It was kind of extraordinary. And that's kind of how I felt about working with this tight constriction of ingredients, is that it really forced creativity. Because, it's easy enough to put a bunch of caviar on a plate and have people be happy. But if you're going to give people a carrot instead of caviar, it has to be a really fucking good carrot, And so that was, from the very beginning, the foundation of our cooking, is that we're going to start with a carrot and make it as good as caviar. And we worked really hard at it. I think, now it's almost 8 years later. I think our restaurant has come to be known a lot for creativity. And I guess I have 3 thoughts about creativity. One is that creativity is the pursuit of truth. And I think at its best, something that is creative and successful reveals something that is essentially true about a form, about an ingredient, about a person, about something universal. I think the second thing is that creativity is not an end in itself. It's there only to discover something. So creativity is taking form that's known and reshaping it so it does something new, not to do something new, but to discover something that's true. And then I think the other thing about creativity is it requires courage. And courage is like a word that seems really old-fashioned. I don't think anyone uses it anymore. I don't think anyone's used it probably in 20 years. And it sounds kind of stilted, but it's still, for me, it has meaning still. Like, okay, so when I was a kid, I learned how to speak French when I was pretty young, and somehow, I think I was in 7th grade, I ended up in a French class that was a little bit below where I was, and I was bored stiff. So there was this poster on the wall, and I memorized it because I think I read it 10,000 times because I just, like, I couldn't pay attention to the class. And it was a picture of Robert Kennedy getting off of a plane, and this great quote, and I always remembered it. The answer to the world's hope is to rely on youth, not a time in life, but a state of mind, temper of the will, quality of the imagination, the predominance of courage over timidity, and the love of adventure over the life of ease. And I kind of always remembered it, that predominance of courage over timidity. Because I think a lot of people feel like courage is like not being afraid, and I think it is being afraid and doing something anyway. Creativity requires risk, and risk necessitates failure. I think the best thing we've done at Kwa, the thing I'm most proud of, is we failed a lot. That sounds terrible, but I think, I don't think the person has been invented that can take risks without failing, and it's definitely not me. And so one of the things that we did a lot at the restaurant is we failed over and over because we were trying to evolve a language, a culinary language that was ours, that seemed like our expression. And it took a lot of work. And there was a lot of times where, I have to say, it was a little bit nuts, and I was doing all of I was getting all the ingredients, I was doing all the foraging, I was writing the menus, and I was cooking. And, it's funny because a lot of good cooks, a lot of good chefs have come out of our kitchen. And I'm really proud of that. And, it's funny to go back and talk to them from the early years, the people who when we worked together, we just kind of laugh about some of the stories. Like, I was putting like 150 new dishes on the menu a year, 200. It was just this constant thing. They weren't all good. And sometimes I'd be like, okay, we're going to change 4 dishes tomorrow. And my sous chef would come in, Chef, remember like last time you told me that, last time it didn't go so well, and you told me to tell you the next time that you shouldn't change 4 dishes. I was like, no, this time it's really going to go well. And so what happened was, it really did take 7 years to kind of discover what was our language. And then when I finally wrote the book, what the book ended up being was a story about that process, a story about discovery. So I brought a few slides, and we're right near Chinatown, which is like my other favorite part of San Francisco. And this is our alley. I brought a couple of pictures just to show you. Our restaurant is like, for me, it's super warm, and at its best, it's a place where I want people to have a good time. I don't want them to feel like they have to talk in hushed voices. It's not a temple of fine dining. It's a place for people to kind of enjoy the table. Because, food, like cooking, is like one of the most human things we do. Like, we cook for each other, for ourselves, for our families, for our friends. The emotion of the table, sharing stories and experiences together, and how that makes us feel about our community and about where we live is the most central thing. And so every day when we come into the restaurant, and I'll probably say we a lot, and it's not because I'm using the royal we, but because we have a lot of people who work in the restaurant, like a lot of people considering how small the restaurant is, and everyone, I think, feels the same way. And everyone feels like, when I opened, I said, okay, all we're going to think about is the people that come in the door every day. That's who is the most important people in the world to us. We never think about press or awards. That's not why we cook. We cook for the people who come in. And I think to this day that has remained the most central tenet in the restaurant. I want people to come in, have a good time, feel very comfortable. And you can see, like, the kitchen is kind of right next to the dining room. So I brought a few slides to talk about some of the food, and kind of use that as a way to talk about how we evolve dishes, some of the ideas, and some of the, I guess, philosophical aspects of how we cook. So more than wild ingredients and local ingredients, I also wanted to understand and incorporate a lot of tropes that are common to this area. So this is a dish that everyone gets right when they sit down. We call it California bowl. It's kind of a joke. It's brown rice, sprouts, and avocado. So we took typical hippie California food and transformed it a little bit. I mean, I think one thing that's really important about dining experience like this, and it's so funny. I keep getting asked about the tyranny of tasting menus, as if like people are being shackled, dragged into these terrible places, these dungeons, and being left to kind of languish there for hours. And I think it's true. A bad tasting menu is like a prison sentence. No one wants that. One thing we work on really hard on is making it fun, kind of like when you're writing a book. The way I put it is like, you know, people, it'd be like saying if there's plenty of good short stories in the world, why would you need a novel? Well, the form allows expression that's entirely different, more complex, and the constituent components don't have to carry as much responsibility. In the case of a restaurant meal, you need to leave with enough food in your stomach or you're not going to be happy. So if you want to serve smaller portions, very intense flavors, maybe something that doesn't taste good when you get to the end of it. Maybe it's super temperature sensitive and you can't have more than 3 bites without it disappearing. You have to do that within a longer menu. That being said, our menu is 2.5 hours. So, you know, we try and keep people moving through. We're an urban restaurant. We're not a country restaurant. People got places to go, and so we're very cognizant of that. But when they come in, the most important thing is we want them to feel comfortable. I mean, this is like, it kind of references chips and dip. It's basically, it's a welcome. It's not a challenge. We want people to settle in, have a glass of champagne, have a few bites to eat, and kind of like chill out while they're getting ready to eat. So the rice is, it's overcooked, pureed, spread very thin, dehydrated, and fried in oil. And like oil that's so hot that literally it goes in for a second and you're pulling it out of the oil and it's blistering and the oil that's clinging to it is still cooking it. And so it's super, super light, like kind of like a chicharrone. Avocado that's charred and mixed with a little lime juice, and then sprouts. So the sprouts we grow ourselves, and it's to have something fresh, it's to have something alive, and also kind of capturing that moment of energy when a plant is just kind of starting to grow. One of the things that I think is really central to how we cook is to take, I guess one thing you can do if you want to have the shock of the new, because you know, if you talk about creativity, if you talk about an expectation of a sense of discovery, one thing is to find something that no one's ever seen before and present it. Well, of course, then you're going to get the shock of the new, but it's not going to have any of the emotional content because there's no sense of familiarity along with it. So it just kind of comes across your radar, and then it's gone. It doesn't have any staying power. But to take something that's very, very familiar and to make it look new again, I think then you get all of the emotional connection of the familiarity and the newness at the same time. So we work a lot with humble ingredients, things that are very, very ordinary, and we work really hard to make them new. So this came from my partner in the business, Ron Boyd. He said, we were talking about a dish, and he said, what about beet and rose? And he was thinking about the flavors. For some reason, I just started thinking about what if I made the beet look like a rose? This is the most difficult dish to produce we've ever done. There's no molds, it's all done by hand. It is so tedious, so labor intensive. Roasting, slicing, compressing, putting it together. Underneath it, a little bit of yogurt, and then the ice on the side is rose petals. So if you imagine like a rose petal tea with a little bit of honey and lemon. So bright, fresh, like a soda on a hot day. Like you take a bite and you keep wanting more. It kind of draws you in. So it's a first course. It's meant to reset people's expectations, like a sense of surprise. A lot of the the ideas that would come in the rest of the meal. We cook with a lot of acidity. We cook with a lot of brightness for me. And one of the things to talk about is energy a lot in the book. And the idea of energy to me is partly in the products you work with, and partly it's how you cook. And so acidity makes things jump. It makes things alive a little bit. And so so this is a dish that we did that in a way, it's not just about elevating, but within the kitchen, it's about how hard it is and how much you have to respect the effort of making a simple form. So I wrote a book in 2003, it came out in 2004, with a natural perfumer named Mandy Aftel. I met her in 2001 through a mutual friend, and think about, like, this is a woman who has basically taken an art form that's thousands of years old, that disappeared for 100 years, and has almost single-handedly brought it back, which is making perfume out of natural essences. because nothing you find in a supermarket is made from anything natural. They started making things, they started figuring out how to synthesize the top 2 or 3 notes out of hundreds. So what makes food so complex is this incredible organic chemistry that you can actually mimic pretty easily, but you don't get any of the richness. It doesn't change, it's very static. And so when we met, she showed me about essential oils, which I'd never worked with before, but even more about the relationship between what we eat, smell, taste, and remember, and how what we smell is most of what we taste. And this dish is cucumber and melon, so biological cousins. There's 2 forms. One is a drink. It's melon juice, cucumber juice, and a little bit of lime. And then a little salad of compressed melon, cucumber, and little borage leaves have a cucumbery flavor. So this dish, you see that there's that little thing that says mint. That's a spray that Mandy made. We've collaborated together on a lot of things over the years. But this was basically like we had a plate, we sprayed it with this mint, and we put 2 things on top of it. So you get it. There's no mint in the dish. You smell mint. So the first thing that happens is you have the smell of mint and the taste of cucumber and melon. By the end, your taste buds have been totally fooled, so you're tasting mint in the food even though there's no mint in the food. And so it's really fun, and it's also like a kind of a trompe-l'oeil for, like a kind of a sensory trompe-l'oeil. So this dish I made as kind of a joke for a friend. Massimo Bottura is an Italian chef, a very great Italian chef, has a restaurant in Modena. And he took one of the famous dishes of Emilia Romagna, his region, bollito misto, and he made a dish called bollito misto no bollito, so boiled meat not boiled. And so at first, like his region was just like appalled. It's a very traditional region, and to take something that's a traditional touchstone and reinvent it, oh, that was just like no one like that. Well, over time it caught on, and it became one of his most famous dishes. And then I was talking to him one time, and he was laughing that it had become so copied, people were even making like Frito misto no Frito. And so he came to eat at my restaurant. I made fried egg, not fried. And so it's like an egg yolk, poached in smoked oil, and then around it is breadcrumbs, have a little bit of smoke. Different kinds of brassica, so cauliflower and broccoli, stuff like that. And then the sauce is this very intensely acidic, because the egg is very rich, kind of an emulsion based on steamed egg white. And so he came in, and I did it for him, and he loved it, but like even more, I loved the dish that came out of it. Then over time, what the dish evolved into is actually a dish that we serve now at the restaurant, which is that same yolk, no breadcrumbs, a little bit of caviar, a little bit of whipped creme fraiche and chive. So simple. One of the things we discovered, I think in earlier times, I really wanted to challenge people more. And now I kind of changed my mind about that a little bit. I think at the beginning of the meal was a good time to be very comforting. So we're a 2 Michelin star restaurant. I never set out to make a 2 Michelin star restaurant, but that's what we are. And so more and more I feel like, well, shit, if that's what we are, I think we need to provide a little bit more of the kinds of things, a few moments that people expect, of luxury, of a nod to tradition. And so caviar, this egg yolk that's been smoked and cooked, or is cooked in smoked oil to almost a custard consistency, creme fraiche and chive, right down the middle of the road, perfectly done. Everyone loves it. And a lot of people at the end of the day they'll go, everything was so great, especially that egg. Well, maybe 5 years ago, I would have looked at them like, oh no, but I did so much else that was so much more interesting. I can't believe you love the crowd pleaser. And now I just kind of like, great. Because that's what it's there for. It's there for people to love. So, this is how, like, even when we're, for us, food is part of like a kind of continual evolution. And, so what started out as something totally different has turned into something like the main part of it turned into something we serve every day. This was like a, I'm not going to talk too much about this. This is a morel dish. I was at Full Belly stand in Marin, and they had new potatoes that had just come in. Next to the new potatoes, they had popcorn. They just happened to be having it side by side. And then I thought, mushroom, potato, corn. Makes sense. Why not? I'd never cooked with popcorn before. I came back, I made this dish, a little bit popcorn sauce and some basil sprouts. So it was a very nice dish. But what was interesting about it was, right before I blended, the dish demanded a very elegant popcorn sauce, like very smooth. But right before I blended it, I kept looking at it, and the process is very simple. It's popcorn, water, butter. Bring it up to a boil about 30 seconds, strain it. That liquid, so like if you took butter and water, heat it, cool it in the refrigerator, and then remove the butter so it's just water, that water is going to taste like butter. So fat, like the flavor of fat is water soluble. So we do that a lot. We cook things with fat. We take the fat out. The liquid carries the flavor. And so in this case, we kept using that liquid to cook more and more popcorn. And the popcorn that was saturated, we passed it. And this is a dish. I mean, to even call it a dish is a little bit of a stretch. It's a fun little thing that we throw into the menu sometimes. A basket strainer and a pot and a spoon. That's what we use to make this. So it's very low tech. We pass through a basket strainer. What comes out on the other side is exactly like grits. So basically, this is grits made from popcorn. You know, one of the things that I think about a lot is what it means to be an American cook. I think, you know, our traditions are very new, our country's very new, and we're mostly made up of immigrants. My family is a family of immigrants, you know. 3 generations ago, none of my family was in this country, and I think that's true of most of this country. And so what does it mean to be an American cook? And what does it mean to work within traditions that aren't our traditions, and how do we make them our traditions? So there's starting to be, very early on, but starting to be regional identity. The South, I think, is much more developed than most other parts of the country, and grits is one of our most iconic regional dishes. Popcorn, I mean, everyone knows popcorn. Everyone goes to the movies. Like, it's one of our most kind of well-known pop culture sensory memories. So combining the two, grits made from popcorn, you take 2 things that are incredibly familiar and make something new. So I think maybe that's kind of, I don't know, something about American food in that. The other part of our culture, and our culture here in San Francisco, and I talk a lot about San Francisco and California's history and our history and here, is that we have an incredible swirl of people from all over the world here. You know, part of being a very new city is that, I mean, the people who grow our food, they're from Japan, China, South America, France, Italy. And they come with their seeds, they come with their backgrounds, their ideas. And so what we have the flavors of the world here, grown here. And so we study a lot about, sometimes I see a product that I don't know, I'll ask, well, how do you know, in Italy, how do you make that? What do you do with this when in Japan? You know, and we learn a lot about new ways to look at food. You know, I think an ingredient is kind of like, a lot of people think it's like a piece of paper, right? You got 2 sides. But I think if it's like a diamond, it's like so many facets, and like we're constantly turning things over to find a new facet. It's the same thing, just you're looking at it in a different way. And so this dish came out of a series of dishes called Earth and Sea. I went through a period where I was kind of naming things more poetically. I stopped. I got really bored with that. But this stuck with me because when I first moved to San Francisco, I was at the edge of the city. I mean, I grew up on the ocean in a little town called Manchester in the North Shore of Massachusetts, and it's right next to a fishing town called Gloucester, which was made famous by Sebastian Junger's Perfect Storm, and then I think they made a movie which is probably more famous than the book. And the ocean, the smell of the ocean and of seaweed drying on the rocks, of of the feeling of what it's like to be on the coast is so deeply ingrained in me that I don't think I could ever live too far away from the ocean. And so where I lived was right on the edge of San Francisco, right where this incredibly dramatic moment where the water comes in, there's a little bit of beach, and then the forest starts. And so I'm always, like, we have a lot of dishes that kind of trying to capture this moment, this energy that happens right where the two things meet. And so the little circles are tofu coagulated with seawater. So this is something that our pastry chef, Matt Tinder, brought into the kitchen. It's very traditional. It's done all through coastal areas in Asia. They'll use actual seawater to coagulate instead of the boiled down chemicals or kind of minerals. And this is kind of like, it's like fresh ricotta. It's not pressed. We make it ourselves, and it's really, really a delicate, incredible product. When we make it, it separates into curds and whey. We take the whey, mix it with tomato water, so kind of like a sweet, clear elixir of tomato, chopped seaweed, or sea lettuce, I should say, and then a bunch of different kinds of fresh seaweed. So fresh seaweed is something I had this kind of fixation about. I couldn't find any for years, and then finally we were working with a company down in Monterey Bay called the Monterey Bay Abalone Company. I was talking to them in 2007, and they're like talking about all of the different kinds of seaweed they were feeding to the abalone. And they're like, wait a minute, you have fresh seaweed. I want fresh seaweed. It's like, can you send me the seaweed with the abalone? So they said, sure. And so that's where we started working with it. And it took a long time to figure out how to, a lot of them are carrageenophytes. So when you go to a place and they've used carrageenan or something to thicken, those come from seaweed. So if you don't treat the seaweeds in a certain way, they will just kind of ooze like a snail trail or something. It's really kind of gross. And so fresh seaweeds, and then a little bit of olive oil, pungent but not overwhelming. And so what's really funny about this, and then a little bit of cherry tomato. So I took this to a table, like it had been on the menu about a month. Table of tourists. I put it down. I do go into the dining room, and I never used to. But now I find that, like, I really like to see people. They may or may not want to actually talk to me, but I think if they do, or it's just nice to know that someone's cooking your food, I guess. And so I put it down, and they look up at me, and they're like, this is great. We've been eating this all week. I was like, I'm thinking to myself, whoa, they've been eating tofu coagulated with seawater, seaweed, and tomato all week. This is like crazy. And I look at them, I'm like, really? Like, yeah, tomato, mozzarella, olive oil, because that's kind of what it looked like. And so a lot of our food kind of has this, like the little nesting dolls, it's like an idea inside an idea inside an idea. So the connectivity is what kind of draws people in. A lot of different kinds of people can recognize different things within the food, and I think that's really important. So this, to me, is like a dish that's like California, like San Francisco, like part of our kind of culture. This is another thing that, I love tarts. And I was making like very traditional tarts for many years, and then one day I wanted to do something different, so I flipped it over. Crust on top, filling in the middle, the top on the bottom. And actually, the way it eats, everything about it was great. So I went through a few iterations. There's 3 of them in the book. This was the last one. Is the weirdest one, and definitely my favorite. So the top crust is buckwheat, sheep's milk fromage blanc underneath, and then raw and cooked fennel, a little burnt fennel oil. There's wild fennel pollen, so a lot of anise flavors in the chervil. The sauce around it, wheatgrass. So, again, trying to work with like iconic things, but kind of wrap it into a sensibility that's delicious. Because, at the end of the day, if it's not delicious, it's like, it may or may not be a good idea, but it's definitely not worth serving. I put these pictures in here just to show you a little bit, because they're in the book, about how we put a dish together. I'm not going to go through the dish too much. It's salsify, black trumpet mushrooms, and wood sorrel with lichen vinaigrette. So it's kind of a dish of the forest and winter a little bit. But you can kind of see a little bit about how much detail goes into putting these dishes together. And so what you get is this, and it looks very, very simple in a way. Well, we don't scatter those things all over the plate. You know, this is on a light table, but really when you get it at the restaurant, you would get this and the vinaigrette. And it looks so simple, it's easy to eat, it tastes good, but what goes into it is all of these layerings of things. But the lichen vinaigrette, so lichen's a fungus that grows on trees. It's kind of like mushrooms, basically. And it's not something we really worked with before, but just by accident, I found myself in a forest, and I found a piece. It would look beautiful. I ate it. And I mean, that's the thing about cooks. Like, we're very curious. I mean, I'm amazed that I'm still alive. Like, I eat anything. If it moves, if it doesn't move, like, I'm like, I'll try it. I started chewing on it. It didn't really taste like anything, and all of a sudden, this really deep, mushroomy, earthy, like really delicious flavor came, and I'm like, huh, this could be a cooking ingredient. And then, so I took it back. I learned that you need to boil lichen. So there's, and by the way, this is called a kind called Parmotrema. It's most of the hundreds of kinds of lichens are edible. A few aren't. It's not like something you should go and really do what I did, because you just don't want to. But we boiled it, dehydrated, and ground into a powder. And what was amazing is when we boiled it, at a certain point, the bitterness boiled away, and we're left with something like earthy. It tasted like black trumpet mushrooms and kind of like truffles. Super, super labor intensive. Then we coated the beef in it. Beef is from Prather Ranch, so grass-fed beef. Same people I've been dealing with for so many years, because it just tastes good. They take care of their animals well, and they have their own slaughtering house, like beginning to end. The process is totally controlled. This is a dish of tradition. So all of our dishes are built in some way, shape, or form on tradition. It's like I am a tiny speck in this long continuum of cooks. And I think if you don't know what came before, you can't affect what comes after. And so this is basically boeuf bordelaise. And it doesn't look anything remotely like that dish, but for me, that's what it's built on. Beef, mushrooms, spinach, marrow sauce. Except the mushrooms, there's some chanterelle, and sometimes we've done it with porcini, but the mushroom, the main mushroom, is the lichen. And the spinach is a coastal spinach, so kind of salty and minerally. And then the bordelaise is infused with native spices, so wild bay with its minty menthol kind of aroma, the citrus of Monterey cypress, kind of a fresh green anise from wild fennel, and a deep earthy licorice from angelica root. A ton of lime juice, like shocking amount of lime juice, even though it doesn't taste acidic, and a little bit of rice wine vinegar. So it looks like every sauce you've ever had. Very dark and kind of brooding. It tastes bright and fresh and green. So it's exactly what the tradition is, but exactly 100 times opposite from it. And so somehow I think for me, that's what we try and get, is this connection to people, this connection to tradition shown in a new way, synthesized through our own sensibilities. I think, so one thing, you know, one question I get a lot is, oh, you wrote a book, you've had this restaurant all this time, what's next? And I guess what's next is cooking in my restaurant. And you know, there's this thing about with the media that's like new, but there's something kind of beautiful about a restaurant. I mean, if you really love a place and you put your heart into it, over time, it's kind of like any relationship. Like right at first, you have this flush of newness and it's so exciting, but the depth of feeling you get over time, as you get to know this person, this place more and more, it becomes so satisfying. Like, Qua is the last place I'm going to cook at. It's like the place that, as quirky as it is, as terrible as the location is, you know, we're remodeling it again in January. We keep improving it. I'm like more excited now than I was when we opened. And so sometimes what's next is doing what you already do, but a little bit better. And we've got a great team of people, and they allow me to come here and talk, which is, by the way, totally bizarre, because I never got into restaurants to talk to people. So, you know, one of the things I mentioned before is like this idea of a culinary language. You know, as I was growing up, I wasn't good at talking to people. I didn't have a lot of communication skills. And I think that's true of a lot of people in restaurants. And you're probably sitting here saying, okay, you've talked for about 40 minutes straight, so, but I learned that. It's not natural. What is natural to me is the language of cooking. And it's a nonverbal language, but it's like, you know, when I was young, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. My grandfather, he was the guy who took us to restaurants. I love restaurants from when I was an early age because of my grandfather. I would sit right next to him. I would get the cherries out of his Manhattans. I felt so special. Like that was the moment, actually, that I felt most special in my life. You know, and I think everyone has their own shitty stories of what did or didn't go right when they were growing up. But my parents split up early, and I was kind of left to my own. But that moment when I was in a restaurant with my grandfather, I felt like the center of the universe. And so for me, that's what restaurants were. They were not reality. A restaurant was a place where you could be anything, where your life could just like totally transform. My grandmother, as outgoing and gregarious as my grandfather, she was quiet and inward. And so I spent a lot of time with her in the kitchen. She was a great cook. She was not good at expressing herself or her love for her family through her words, but through her cooking. It was magic. And she would cook for 30 people at the holidays, and it would be like she was casting a spell over everyone. The way she could express herself through her food was incredible. She wouldn't sit down, she wouldn't eat. She stayed in the kitchen on the stove all night. You know, maybe if you beg her, you'd get her to take literally 2 bites of something. And you know, when I grew up, I realized that I kind of became her in a lot of ways. So somehow this is very familiar. Writing is a very familiar form of communication, but you know, talking I think is really hard. And so the other thing that's next, and I brought this because we have about 120 employees. We have more than just one restaurant. Everyone says, how do you run 4 restaurants? I don't run 4 restaurants. That would be inhuman. I have a team of people. This is 20 people out of 120, and just a nice little cross-section of really amazing, talented people. And so part of what's next is to help the company grow and to kind of stay out of the way, to let them do what they're good at doing. And I think as I get older, I realize a biggest part of management is not getting in people's way, not inhibiting their natural ability. You know, out of everyone here, I would, and I could go on for another hour talking about all of them. That guy up there with the glasses, Ron Boyd, my partner, he's the guy who oversees the other restaurants. I'm mostly a cheerleader for the other restaurants. I go there, I have dinner, I bring people in, I say everything's awesome. And it allows me to do the work at Qua. Ron is probably one of the most creative, brilliant, kind, and generous people I've ever met. And so I feel very lucky. And so part of what's next is we have a couple of projects for next year already. Neither one of them are restaurants, and both of them are pretty exciting. And then this is the other part of what's next. So I have 2 kids, and you know, I always said I wouldn't have kids that grew up without seeing their father. So it turns out that I have 2 kids that are growing up without seeing their father. So I'm trying to change that. And so, you know, that's part of having this amazing team. I have a great chef de cuisine, and who, the kitchen, you know, there's a great quote by Paul Bocuse. Someone asked him, he was out of the kitchen, he says, who's cooking your kitchen tonight? He said, the same people that cook every night. And so having this team of people allows me to kind of have the ability to help the company grow, and also I think maybe have the ability to, I don't know, kind of have a little bit more family time. So I thought maybe you might have some questions, and then maybe you guys might have some questions too, about anything I talked about, didn't talk about, embarrassing personal questions.
I think we're about the same age. Certainly we followed a certain path from the East Coast.
872 years old?
I'm
That's how old I am.
71, so I'm a little bit younger. One of the things that I found interesting in my career, and I kind of heard you echo, is as you started off, you had a desire to make things more intricate or more simple. And if that makes sense, you kind of have evolved, and it sounds like Qua is maybe not your end game, but kind of your ultimate evolution. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, that's true. Although, you know, the thing about evolution is it never stops. So like for me, it's a constant refinement, and it's about hiding our work, our effort.
Right.
If you see the effort on the plate, we've done something wrong. So the work should stay in the kitchen, and what's on the plate should be easy. It should be like, no one should have to wonder how to eat something, and this is just my own feeling, or when they eat it, they shouldn't wonder what they're eating. Like, so we go for flavor. When you talk about simplicity, simple is hard. Simple to mean concentrated, clear distillation of a flavor that's just like a pinpoint, like a shock of recognition. To deliver that, like every single time, that's really hard. And so that's really what our focus is, and that comes from ingredients, it comes from technique, and it comes from knowing when to stop, I think, a little bit too.
Over manipulation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing because I think, you know, the second you take a chicken and kill them, you manipulate it. And then you put it in the oven, you manipulate it again. So you have roast chicken, which is the least manipulated thing, but everything is manipulation. But for me, it's more a matter of understanding the proper limits of a dish. Each dish has its own moment where you just need to have the intuition to know when to stop, to add something. And I think intuition is the hardest thing to teach.
That only comes with time, right?
Or it doesn't come at all.
Many times, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I think you can teach anyone how to cook well, but there's a certain point at which you can't really teach someone to make a connection that's not already in place. But you can teach someone to make a connection that has been established.
As a chef, there are many things that people do in my kitchen that have infuriated me. What is an example for you?
You know what? It's funny because, I mean, I'm so much better than I was, but if you caught me 10 years ago, oh my God, maybe, but even now, like what just sends me through the roof is just not caring. Like I feel like when people come into a restaurant, they've given us their trust, and that trust is sacred. And when I feel like people haven't taken that seriously, you know, that's the only thing. Like we have so many safety nets in place, it's almost impossible for a mistake to get to the dining room at this point, because we have so many checks and balances along the way. But not caring is the only thing. So if you make a mistake, we're human, we make mistakes. That's not something that makes me upset, but not caring or not trying hard enough is the thing that gets me, because it's like, if you don't want to work that hard, you know, go to another restaurant that has a simpler form where you don't have to work that hard. Our form demands a lot of work, and it demands a lot of caring. And the caring is the thing that is the most important, you know? If you care and you make a mistake, it happens. And we get some young cooks that come in, sure they make mistakes, they're not experienced, but a lot of heart, you know? And that's what matters.
How do you feel about the epic issue with obesity in this country, the government's attempt to either tax soda or perhaps to inspire people to eat better, which I'm certainly a fan of, but I'd love your thoughts on that. You don't necessarily deal with healthy eating as a focus in Qua.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you mentioned that. So for about 3 years, we've been working with Larkin Street Youth Services.
Okay.
And you know, you get hit up a lot in restaurants for, you know, why don't you make 1,000 pieces of something on a shitty piece of toast for, you know, the opera or something. And you feel like nickel and dimed a little bit. And I thought, well, why don't we just take a lot of energy and put it in one place that is doing work that we really believe in, that has our values. And this is an organization that takes kids in off the street. They give them counseling and job training and a place to stay and food.
Okay.
And so we've tried a lot of different things with them, but the thing that worked best is I finally called them and I said, look, bring some kids over. We're closed on Mondays. I'll do a cooking class. And these are kids who grew up, a lot of them, with processed food, without healthy food. A lot of things that are so basic to me, they've never seen before. And it wasn't like we were on opposite sides of the table. It's like, okay, everyone come on back. Here's some cutting boards. Here's some knives. Try not to cut your fingers off, you know? And let's cook some food. Let's have fun. So the whole thing is delicious and fun, you know? And get people with a taste memory of something that's good for them that's delicious. Because if no taste memory of good food, there's no way to reorient. The way we're put together, if you grow up being comforted by potato chips is what you're going to reach for in a time of stress or crisis. And if someone gives you a bowl of greens but you have no association with them, you're not going to crave them. But if you have a bowl of greens that's delicious and you associate it with this very fun day that you're hanging out with these people who you're living with, and then you have this good experience, then you're like, oh, I'd eat that again. Right. Because it's not just good, but it's connected to a good feeling. And then the other thing is having some basic tools to feed themselves at home, that good food. And so we started something called the Cooking Project. And right now it's out of San Francisco Cooking School. And it focuses tightly on the tenderloin, using products that they can get in their neighborhood. We have a different chef come every other week and teach them one or two little things that they can tell a story about, things that have meaning, whether it's a pasta. We've had different kinds of porridge, different kinds of stews, salads, whatever. And then afterwards, everyone makes all the food and they sit down and eat it together. And in a way, that's even like the best part of it. So it's a very modest program. We're not trying to change the world, but I don't think you can have too many people working on this. Ours is just like, maybe at the end of the year, 200 kids know how to feed themselves a little bit better than they did before. I think that's pretty great.
What do you tell with the outbreak of the celebrity chef? Certainly there's the television.
like a virus.
there is, I mean, to some extent, I mean, I know Bobby Flay, Morimoto, I know that they can cook. I do not know them, but I know that they can cook. They did not get there because they couldn't. I know that there's plenty of chefs on TV that are great personalities and are able to excite people. I also know that I have kids from 10 to 20 coming up to me saying, I want to be a chef.
Well, every development that's new in culture has good things and it always has side effects. Right. Like you don't get any forward movement without a little bit of kind of negative side effect. This fetishization of of chefs is like crazy time. We're manual laborers. Like we're like the people who lay carpet or paint walls or put, you know, woodwork in. That's our job. Our job really hasn't changed for 100 years. Our perception of the job has changed. But like at the end of the day, we don't have coal in our ovens anymore, so that's a big improvement.
Sometimes you do now, and
well,
flavoring things.
That's true, but at least we're not breathing in. But you know, I think our approach is much more human in the kitchen. You know, we're much more cognizant of people's emotional development. Like I always think, how do I create an environment that supports people to be as good as they can be? You know, so we're thinking about these things a lot more than we used to, but the basic job is the same. You have raw ingredients that you transform into food, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of hours. So however that's being contextualized, to the extent that it brings people closer to thinking about what they put in their bodies, I think it's great. And if a little bit of that is that people have this idea that it's a glamorous profession, come on, they'll learn soon enough.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much for allowing me to host this and for coming to San Francisco.
Thank you so much for
pleasure.
having me. Hey, thanks for coming.